Well, good evening. Tyler here and Amy with BroncBuster. And
this is Glenn from Radflow.
And Glenn from Radflow. Glenn is our special guest, and I'm sure the reason why most of you guys are on tonight. We get to talk one of these great subjects, and that is suspension. Because in my opinion, suspension is a lot of what revolves around everything we do in an IFS, I mean, any off-road vehicle, any vehicle, but it's very important, the right suspension in an IFS vehicle. So with that, I'd like Glenn to take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about himself, who he is and where he come from.
Hey, Tyler, thanks. So obviously you can hear from my accent that although I'm American, I'm not from America, like half the country, I would say, but I'm from South Africa, and my brother and I started Radflow back in 1992. It was a company called Go Mad Racing and Development. And we were just two guys making shocks in a garage in South Africa, and we supplied shocks for off-road race teams. And we ended up making stuff for road bikes and track cars and a bunch of things. We had a military contract for steering dampers for an armored vehicle. So we were really busy, and it allowed us to move forward with our business. Go Mad Racing didn't sound that professional, so we took the racing and development part of it and we turned it into Radflow. So Rad being racing and development and the flow being fluid dynamics. So Radflow suspension technology was born. So ultimately, I like to say that Radflow is 100% made in the USA, but it was born in South Africa. Everything is made in my shop here in Southern California in Orange County. I employ 25 people, got a bunch of CNC machines, and we're very proud of the product that we push out. And we like to think that we're in a niche part of the market where we can build people what they want and not what we think they need.
Perfect.
So we've been here since 2005. It's 2023. We have an anniversary coming up in a couple of years, so we're looking forward to that.
Very good. So I guess, yeah, what you brought up something. You guys like to fill a niche market and not necessarily just build somebody what they want, but actually what they need. So tell us what sets you apart a little bit, maybe from some of the other suspension companies out there. What makes Radflow a great option for our customers?
Well, I mean, it's the shock market is, as everybody knows, is a very crowded place. And when I came over here, I was very naive in thinking that there was a place for us in off-road racing, and we very quickly realized that our two biggest competitors owned that market space. So we got into the OE market, and the only way I was going to differentiate what we do is through customer service. So to this day, if anybody phones and they have an issue, they can ultimately speak to me to get this thing dealt with, and I like to think that we can deal with any problem. My staff are really good, great bunch of guys, and we can deal with this before it has to get to the point where anybody needs to talk to me. But ultimately, that's what we're about, is customer service, giving the customer what they want. And, building shocks, yeah, we make a lot of shocks out of the same, but we valve shocks differently for different applications. So it's not just a one size fits all. It may be like that in the lengths of the shocks, but ultimately, there's different spring rates that we offer, different damping that we can offer for different applications.
So let's talk about that. I was asking you a few questions, and maybe for some of the guys out there that don't know what describe what spring rate is and the importance of that, and what dampening is then.
So spring rate, I mean, a spring is what holds your vehicle up. If you didn't have springs, everything would just collapse onto the ground. So a spring is what holds your vehicle up, and there's a particular rate that the vehicle will need to maintain a certain ride height. And if you just took a spring and there was nothing to dampen it or control that spring rate, everything would bounce around. There'd be no control. So you have a shock absorber, or a damper, as we call it in the industry, to control those spring oscillations. And at the same time, the damper or shock absorber also controls how the vehicle performs on the road under acceleration, braking, turning, going over rough stuff, etc.
So then that leads me into the next question, because not all the reason for putting an aftermarket suspension is related to additional height, correct?
No.
So tell us about that. I mean, why, let's forget about lift and let's just talk about the advantages from a stock suspension. Let's say the Bilsteins that come on the Sasquatch Bronco, and why you might want to go to a good aftermarket coilover, especially with, like I said, the remote reservoir.
So if you take just a stock Sasquatch Bronco with the Bilstein on it, I mean, Bilstein makes a great product, but they make thousands of them, and they have a contract to put these shocks on the vehicle, and that shock is a compromise in all aspects. So somebody may want to take their vehicle off road, and they need a bigger shock that can give them a reservoir and or a compression adjuster to allow them to have increased damping and a higher spring rate when they're going off road. If you're hitting a dirt road, lots of corrugations, you'll find that the stock Bilstein would overheat pretty quickly. But with the bigger shock with a reservoir and or compression adjuster, you'll be able to control that a lot better. And the shock, you won't experience the fade to the degree that you would with the Bilstein. So there's nothing wrong with fitting an aftermarket shock if we were talking about in a stock lengths, because it would be built to the same dimensions. You'd maximize the suspension travel with the stock upper and lower control arms to make sure that the drive shafts are protected at full droop.
Perfect. So one of the things that you and I talked about is about the portals, right? So one of the advantages to portals is that becomes your suspension, your regear. It solves a lot of issues in one. But then the question is out there, okay, well, aren't I better off to keep my stock suspension? Which you answered that, and that I don't think we need to go into that again. But one of the other questions is, what are some other advantages? For instance, one of the biggest things on a Bronco that we talk about, IFS, or on any off-road rig as far as that goes, is travel, right?
Yeah.
And is travel always travel a good thing on all vehicles? A lot of travel, I guess.
Well, not necessarily. You want to maximize the travel as much as you can. So, every vehicle, OE vehicle, has a minimum maximum travel. So you take a stock Bronco and you pull the shocks off and you measure the travel and you see how far you can get with the, where do the CVs bind, and then you bring it back from there and you design a shock around that. So you're maximizing the travel, making sure that the control arms aren't binding on the ball joints. And, effectively the shock is doing the same thing as the stock shock would, but you've improved the ride for off-road, and you can change a spring rate. A guy's fitting a winch and a bumper, what does he do? I mean, he needs another spring. On a stock shock, that's difficult to come by. So that's why these lift companies are out there. I mean, that's how they came about, is by, a stock shock's not going to give you what you want ultimately.
Because you've added all that weight. And that's true. We have a lot of our customers and a lot of guys out there, whether they're overlanding, whether they're adding just all these aftermarket accessories, but weight becomes an issue. And so I guess with that, is it just you said earlier, it's not a one size fits all. Can you explain that a little bit, why it's important to design around each build a little bit?
Well, I mean, if somebody's carrying a winch and a bumper and lots of armor, you need a firmer, stiffer spring rate. So you need to compensate for that with the velding. The rebound was going to be a lot quicker. So you have to control that with additional damping on the rebound side to stop that kicking. You may need to even go up on the compression damping side if you're carrying a heavy weight. This thing is going to tend to want to move around on the spring. So you need to control that spring to allow you to do what you need and to maintain your ride height.
Gotcha. So, we're controlling the ride height. We're limiting, like you said, you kind of want to find out what that maximum droop is, because I think most of us on here have either experienced it or will experience. If you go too far droop, it causes lots of problems on an IFS vehicle. So you're able to control that. Would you say you can control that more than the stock suspension?
No, you're controlling it in the same way. It's just that the stock suspension has, you know, greater failures built into it, or failure control. You know, so the shock is shorter, so the shock won't droop as far. We know that on a stock suspension, it can droop further than what the stock shock will allow, and we still stay within, you know, the relative safety of not damaging the drive shafts or the CV joints. We know we can do that, and we have done that. You know, so it allows us to just get a little more wheel travel, you know, for the guys when they're going off without having to buy up aftermarket upper control arms. And on some vehicles, to be honest, the difference between what we can get out of a stock arm and what an aftermarket upper control arm can offer, it really is within a quarter of an inch of the shaft travel. You know, it depends what vehicle it is.
Gotcha. So, you know, one of the things another question that come out there, or that I get all the time and we talk about, is the value of tuning. Is there much value to tuning a shock? And tell us how you do that. What is the process?
I mean, you know, we're at the same time as, you know, we can build shocks for somebody, you know, they may not be happy with what we present them. So there's loads of guys in the industry that will do a fantastic job in revalving the shock for what you want to do with it. You know, we make a lot of shocks, and sometimes we don't know what the customer is going to use it for, because we're selling it through a dealer, and you know, the customer will buy the shocks and he wants to get them revalved, and he'll go to any one of the great shock tuners out there that will do that for him and give him what he needs to carry the extra weight or change a spring, you know, give him a bit more free bleed if he's racing through the desert, you know, that kind of stuff. The guys who are tuning the shocks would be able to do, and that just shows you that by having a shock that's tunable, you can do any number of things with it to give you the ride that you're looking for.
So what is the process of tuning then? I mean, you know, so I've got my Radflows out there on my Broncos, and you know, they're adjustable with those reservoirs. What is the process of tuning them?
So, I mean, a true shock tune would be, you know, going out with the vehicle, and this all happens before the thing gets released to market. But, you know, if we were tuning an off-road buggy, for instance, at King of the Hammers, you know, the vehicle would come up, send the driver out to go warm the shocks up. You know, we'd watch the vehicle go over a certain set terrain to see what the vehicle's doing and see how the wheels are behaving in relation to the chassis and vice versa. And then we know, okay, we have to increase compression and reduce rebound, or switch that around to get the vehicle to the point where they can go as fast as possible over rough terrain. And that can sometimes take a whole day, you know, depending on where you are and what you have available for you. You know, King of the Hammers is, if you're trying to set your car up completely from scratch at King of the Hammers and you're racing there, we don't have enough time to do that. You know, that all has to happen beforehand. So King of the Hammers is really is a fine tune, and a lot of guys do it. You know, they may have changed a few things for short coils versus desert racing, but, you know, in terms of tuning, and if the shocks aren't right, you know, on that buggy, go back to the trailer, the shocks get taken off, open them up, change the valving, maybe put some bleed in or block bleed ports off, put the shocks back on the vehicle and go and run the vehicle again to see, you know, what changes have been made and can the driver feel them and are they comfortable with those changes.
So none of that tuning then really it doesn't apply much to us in our vehicles, because as long as we kind of give you guys or John in your office the right information, it's going to be tuned pretty close to what we need.
Yeah.
And so tuning's not going to really come into play unless you really start doing a lot of fast off-road and wanting to get just that dialed in perfectly, right?
That's right. Yeah, we try and come up within the confines of what we know the vehicle is going to be used for and the weight that's on the vehicle. We try and come up with a good damp rate or valving to make the shock work for the way we think it should work. I mean, you know, and we're human, we get it wrong, you know, so sometimes these guys are not anywhere nearby that we whip the shocks off and quickly revalve them. On a OE vehicle, it's not that easy. But at the same time, there's guys who live in Nevada or down in San Diego, great guys, retune the shocks for them and do some testing with them, no problem.
Gotcha. There was a question here. Oh, it was from Rob. What's that? Yeah. What is the limit of the shaft?
I'm not sure I understand that. The limit of the shaft.
Okay, I wasn't sure either, but I thought maybe you'd know what he meant.
So, what limits the shaft?
I think
we're talking about what limits the shaft. We're talking about what limits the droop, and there's an internal droop stop inside the shaft.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, what limits
the drive shaft?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what limits the drive shaft. I would think there's a snap ring on the end of the shaft, but we make sure that we don't get to the limit of the drive shaft, so that it's going to pull out, damage the CV joints, or pop a boot or anything like that.
Gotcha. What about? Okay, yeah. Here's a good one. Another question that come up is, what's the purpose of a reservoir versus an IFP style shock? And kind of tell me what the differences are.
So you get three styles of shocks. You get an emulsion style shock where oil and gas mix. There's no space for an internal floating piston, and there's just space for gas. So the oil and gas mix, that's a massive compromise. As a guy that I know who used to work for a competitor used to say, that's like cooking steak in a microwave. It's not very good. But sometimes, there's no other option for an OE style application. The next style up is where you got enough space to put an internal floating piston in that separates the oil from the gas, which is ultimately what you want. You don't want oil and gas mixing. And then in some shocks where you don't have space for an IFP, you can fit a remote reservoir where the IFP lives in the remote reservoir. And that allows you to separate the oil from the gas. Also, having a remote reservoir increases oil volume. And honestly, most of the OE application stuff, the shocks are never going to get hot to the point where it's, you're never going to be able to hold the shock. You have to work the vehicles really, really hard. So for the majority of them, a remote reservoir is not really a thing. You're never going to get it hot. It's not about oil volume. It's about having a bigger gas chamber and allowing you to fit a compression adjuster into the reservoir. That's the only way to do it, so that you can adjust the low speed and high speed damping as you need it. So those are the three styles: emulsion, IFP inside the damper, and then with a reservoir.
So if you don't have that reservoir, what kind of a difference in performance are you going to see without the remote reservoir?
You would see similar performance to with the reservoir, but it's a lot of the shocks. There's no, with the shocks that we make for the Bronco, let's say, we have increased travel. There's no space to fit an internal floating piston in there and have enough space left over for a gas charge. So we have to run a reservoir.
Okay.
Whereas on a Nissan Frontier, we can run a shock with an IFP on it, an internal floating piston, no reservoir. Although we do offer them, we sell loads of the IFP style shocks because we have enough space to fit everything inside there and give it a good ride.
Gotcha. So then let's talk about a travel a little bit. We touched on it some, and let's say travel of the Radflow shock over maybe the stock. How much travel, or are you going to gain any travel if you're talking the same length of suspension? Is it going to be pretty much apples to apples on travel?
You'll gain a little bit of travel. On the Bronco specifically, we run the bump stop on the shaft. It's not, the bump stop's not on the body. So, but at the same time, you still have to control the amount of up travel because you don't want to be bumping into the fender or, causing any issues on the up travel. Just like you have the down travel, you've got to control that at the same time. So you can't deviate too far away from where the stock compressed length is, unless you're controlling that with a bump stop. And if you control it with a bump stop too much, then you run out of up travel. So it's a fine balance between droop or down travel and up travel, is to get the correct ride, making sure that you have enough droop at ride height for the wheel to drop out, and without the vehicle dropping into a hole, allowing the wheel to drop into a pothole, let's say, to maintain your ride height as much as you possibly can.
Did you have a question?
Terry had something to say.
You know what? Terry had a question. He had to replace 2 of his Radflows due to oil leaking and not been able to adjust the other 2. Has anybody else had an issue with that?
When we first came out with the Bronco shocks on the rear, it was only when we found that people were driving the vehicles really hard and some of them were being jumped, that the hose fitting was touching the upper mount. So we subsequently fixed that and changed the design to fix that. So although we've had 1 or 2 people that have had an issue with the adjuster, I'm not aware of any current issues of people having that problem.
Perfect. So, and Popo Patty had pointed out one thing here that I agree. This is a big thing, that you're one of the few companies that make a coilover for the Bronco that allow you to run the stock height on a Sasquatch and adjust from there. So it's nice having that, being able to go at that stock height and adjusting up, especially for those of us that are going to start running portals, because we don't want additional height. We want, some of the other qualities we talked about, right?
And that's exactly what we spoke about at Trail Hero last year. Yeah,
exactly. There was another question. Let's see. If you've never experienced calling a company and having them spec and build a system for you, your exact ride, then start here with Radflow. Yes, I agree. I love the first time I placed my order, John came back with 100 questions for me of, okay, well, how much weight, what are you going to be doing with the Bronco? All these different things to then kind of design around my specific Bronco. And I don't know of any other really, well, there probably are, but I don't know of very many other companies that will do that. So that is commendable for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment.
Okay, so some other questions is, what is general difference between high speed and low speed dampening then?
So an easy way to think about high speed and low speed damping in a very general way is low speed is when the chassis is moving around the wheels, braking, acceleration, cornering, and high speed is when the wheels are moving around the chassis. So going over a speed bump, going through a set of whoops, anywhere where the wheel is moving around the chassis, that's high speed damping in a general way.
So, if let's just say right now that somebody said, all right, I'm going to swap out my suspension. I'm going to put my Radflows on. I don't want additional height, so we're just going to stay the stock height. We've talked about some of those differences. Is it going to affect my ride quality on the highway at all? I mean, we already know it's going to be way better off-road, but what's it going to do for me on the highway? Because a lot of people like to maintain that highway quality ride.
So on highway, it's going to firm up. It's going to take any looseness out of the suspension. So it'll firm up the ride. It's not going to make it harsh, but it's going to make the drivability of your vehicle. It's going to improve that. Some people may find, the firmness not to their liking. They like that softer Cadillac style drive. But, for people who like to drive their vehicles, that will certainly help. A big thing that, obviously people go to bigger tires. There's other factors at play here that will change the way the vehicle feels on and off road. But certainly an aftermarket shock on road will give you a firmer ride, and make the vehicle give you more drivability.
Robert had just mentioned.
Oh, okay. So had a little joke here. So Robert Wozniak said, as much as I want portal, cause an early divorce right now. I think Justin's going to offer him some free counseling there in the product listening. All right. So, and Terry just said that his Bronco plants much better with the Radflows on the highway travel. Being able to adjust for both is great. Yeah. So, I mean, that plays into it. Like you said, when you're cornering, it may not feel like you're going to roll that Bronco over. It's going to be a little stiffer going around those tight, fast corners, right?
Yeah, you can certainly increase corner speeds. We certainly found that.
Cool. So a question that I have personally, because tomorrow, BroncBuster with my not portals, my Radflows on there is actually headed down to Lone Star Ring and Pinion. So I'm done with all the body work. It's painted. We're headed down to do kind of play with it a little bit. And, we know we're limited on an IFS vehicle on front travel. I mean, without doing a long travel, and we can go into that a little bit, but without doing a long travel, we kind of only have so much up travel and so much down travel before we max out and we're going to break stuff, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things we're going to do is he's going to actually move the suspension up, because I have a 3-inch body lift on BroncBuster. And so he's going to be able to remove the lower shock mount, cut up into the body to bring it up, higher in. And then we're going to 4-link the rear. And, we're going to try and, we believe that by increasing the travel on the rear, then we can greatly increase the capabilities of the Bronco, because we're limited in the front. But if we have a lot more travel in the rear, that should make up for some of that. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. It's a fine balance. I mean, it's, as we know on any IFS vehicle, you just can't get you can get the travel, but you're gonna end up making this thing look like some crazy dinosaur, with very wide front axles. So trying to find a balance between front and rear, maximizing the travel as much as you can. Increasing the rear wheel travel, trying to climb an obstacle, usually you can get the nose up, and you don't want to run out of droop on the back. So as long as you keep those wheels in contact with the ground, you have the traction to climb something. So the more droop you have in the back, the better. But at the same time, the more droop you have, the longer the shock becomes. So you've got to be careful about not limiting your up travel.
Okay. All right. No, that's some good advice. I definitely take that. You're a pro at this, and I'm still learning. So, but no, that's the goal. We want to try and gain as much rear travel to make up, but that's some good points. Oh, you know what? Here we had a question from Robert. Robert wants Radflows, but he needs 4 to 5 inches of lift to keep his where he needs it happy, fully loaded. So Robert has a lot of gear and stuff. What options would we have for somebody like Robert that maybe needs 4 to 5 inches to make up for all that extra gear?
Well, if he's trying to lift the vehicle 4 to 5 inches, it sounds like there's a bracket lift that's involved here, something from one of the aftermarket lift companies. And, we can certainly make shocks to suit the lengths that those lift kits, those bracket lifts allow. And we do. We make, shocks to suit Procrom, Superlift, any number of them for a 4 to 6 inches of lift. So, there would be aftermarket lift company components built into that, and we would then follow through with that, with the shocks built for that.
So, and maybe I'm understanding him differently, but I kind of am gathering that he's carrying a lot of weight is why he's needing that extra. So, I mean, we don't necessarily need 4 to 5 inches. It just might be something in the design to stiffen that up a little bit to compensate for that. Correct?
Well, yeah, but generally, let's say you're looking for 3 inches of lift. You're gonna find a spring rate and enough preload to get you to where you want to be. The suspension that we make will only allow you a certain amount of height before you start running out of droop. You don't want to run out of droop. The vehicle will handle unbelievably badly. So, and for people who are carrying a heavy load in the back, we offer firmer spring rates to allow for that. But you're still going to tend to be at 2.5 inches of lift. If you're looking for 4 inches of lift, you know, and maybe I'm not understanding this correctly, but if you're looking to raise the vehicle 4 to 6 inches, then you would need some other bracketry to make that work.
So I'm gathering, especially after this comment, he's dealing with a lot of weight. So it's not necessarily needing 4 to 6 inches of lift. It's more needing to adjust that the spring rate and the preload to
okay. And we do, yeah, we do offer firmer springs in the back to allow guys to carry more of a constant weight.
Okay. So that's another question that I had. You go with a firmer spring in the rear. You know, some of the Broncos, like mine, it's got the 2.3 liter in the front, which is very lightweight. And is there anything you can do in the design of the shock to kind of get rid of some of that, you know, too much of that bounce? I guess you don't want to be too tight, because then as you start going up something, it's going to try and bounce you all over, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for a light front end, you know, you can certainly go for a slightly softer spring rate, which will avoid the spring pushing the vehicle out when you're trying to climb up an obstacle. You know, the whole thing is, how much preload do you need to put into any set spring to achieve your ride height? Springs have a certain amount of travel, so if you go beyond the amount of preload, you could end up coil binding the spring and breaking something on your suspension, which you don't want. So that's why sometimes we have to go to a firmer spring rate to get to the ride that people want. You know, you could always drop the ride and run a softer spring rate with similar preload, but people always want to be higher. They want to run a bigger tire. They're wanting to go faster. They're wanting to do all sorts of things. So you're going to need that firmer spring rate. It's all becomes a compromise. You know, you need a stiff spring rate to go across rough terrain fast, but you don't really need as stiff a spring rate to do slow rock crawling around, you know, Sand Hollow in St. George.
Right. You're going to want a softer spring rate. So then that leads me to the next question. Let's say we go put portals on Amy's Bronco here. She's running the 2.5 inch Radflow coilovers, and we don't want the height. We don't want to swap out our suspension. Can we just adjust that down and we're good? Or is there anything we need to do with them to be able to do that?
You can adjust it down. Yeah, that's not a problem. And if you find that the spring rate is still too firm, you know, then you can go from a 600 rate or whatever's on there to a 550, you know, and just put a little more preload in there for what you want to do. Yeah, that's easy. Yeah.
So for the guys out there that maybe already have, and I'm kind of asking this for Terry as well. Terry Bresser on here, because he's carrying your 2.5 inch as well, and he's got a set of portals that are showing up, well, any day now. They're still in customs or whatever, but that answers that question too. Then so on here, because he had that question, he's like, well, man, I don't want to have to run 40-inch tires. I want to stay in my 37s, or do I need to put a bigger tire? But as long as we can adjust that back down, we should be good. Now, so what kind of things do we need to look for on that then, as we're lowering that suspension back down, to kind of see if there's anything we need to adjust after that?
Well, I mean, you want to avoid, well, on the shock, you know, there's a certain amount of thread showing, so you can only lower it a certain amount. Right. And at the same time, you want to have a sufficient up travel that you're not constantly on the bump stop. Right. So I think if you're tending towards a stock vehicle height, you know, within an inch, I think you'll be good.
Okay. Let's see. So those are all the questions that I had written down. Are there additional things maybe that we haven't asked you that you'd like to point out about your awesome product?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've covered most of what we discussed earlier in emails and chatting. I think, you know, one of the biggest things about any shock absorber company and people buying shocks is that they need to buy shocks from a company that's going to give them the best possible service. You know, and yes, we all love to hear feel-good stories about people and what are they doing with our product. You know, we share that stuff constantly on social media. but at the same time, you know, it's a manufactured product. Things are going to go wrong. And to me, it's not what things are like when times are good. To me, it's what are we like when times are bad? How do we deal with those issues? And
Absolutely.
as I said at the beginning, you know, that's what we built our company on. Is, you know, yes, we have processes that people have to go through, and they may seem unfair with regards to warranty and claiming and doing this and having to send stuff back. But at the end of the day, if we find that we've made a mistake, then it's on us. We're going to sort that out. That's the biggest thing. Find somebody you can trust who's going to give you the best advice. I mean, a few years back, I had a guy call me. He had an old Jeep and he wanted to buy some shocks, and I gave him a quote and I said, "What do you plan to do with your Jeep?" And he said, "You know, honestly, it's just a mall crawler." And I said, "Go buy yourself a good set of Bolstein shocks. You know, as much as I want to take your money, I'd rather you be a happy customer and reference me rather than just you buying the shocks and then maybe not liking the ride and you have post-purchase depression and thinking, well, you've been ripped off." I would ever hate that to be a story. So find somebody you can work with, somebody who's going to give you great advice, and somebody who's going to back up the product that they sell you.
And so I can tell you guys, that's one of the reasons why we've put Radflow as our main suspension partner is from day one when I met Glenn and talked with Glenn, and we, you know, and I asked him some questions and I've talked to different people. I mean, I'm good friends with Jesse over at Hellabad Broncos and a few different people. And that was resoundingly what I got. And it was that the customer service, and Glenn's not one of those pushy salesmen that's going to try and get you to buy something just so he can make a quota and a sale. And really, that's the way, you know.
Sounds like he likes to educate his customers
Yes.
and let them make those decisions, which sounds like a lot of how Tyler likes to run his.
Well, I strongly believe that people will buy when they feel like they have their question answered, they've been educated, and then they make an educated choice and decision. I don't need to try and pressure somebody into a sell, and so that's one thing I really do appreciate about Glenn and your company. So,
well, thank you. You know, there's so much information out there. You know, you can go and read any forum that's got like 170 pages, and in that forum, you can find people who will agree with you, disagree with you, agree with you, and then disagree with you, all within the space of 7 pages. It's like, how does anybody who's trying to learn about this get any information from that? You know, it's I would say just go to the people who do the stuff for a living. You know, if you're trying to understand valving and you're trying to learn it on a forum, that's almost an impossibility. The only way to understand valving and tuning and stuff is to get your hands involved in it. You can understand a concept. But I have lots of guys who say, well, can you teach me how to understand valving? I said, I can't. I've been doing this since 1992. It's just something that I know, something that I've learned driving my own race cars and working with people who, you know, tuning their cars at the same time. Am I the world's best tuner? Absolutely not. But some of my customers are. The guys that I sell product to are some of the world's best shock tuners.
Well, that's an important point is sometimes, you know, we surround ourselves by the best, and that makes us even that much better, right?
Exactly. And I mean, you know, I will call these guys that I sell product to tune product for a living, and I'll ask them stuff because, you know, if you're not involved on a daily basis, you know, for a while we missed out on, you know, we were going to King of the Hammers, but technology moved on with shaft speeds increasing and so on in the shocks. And you know, so when we came back and we released the new Evo series for off-road race, you know, we worked with a couple of guys to understand what was required so that we now have a product, you know. And there's a fantastic racer, a guy called Paul Wolf. I'm sure a few people listening may have heard of him. He's killing it in the Ultra 4 scene. But, you know, he's one of our sponsored drivers, and he races on our new Radflow series, Evo series. And the same thing that we do on anything in the OE market is, and in the race market, they connected, you know, they learn from each other. So what Paul Wolf is using in his race car, the similar technology is put into the shocks that you're running on your Bronco. Right. You know, it's all there.
So, and I'm sorry, I skipped over this this question here. Is what kind of compression adjusters do you use, and what's the adjustment range?
So we have two styles of compression adjusters. We have a low speed bleed adjuster with a high speed blow off. What that means is there's two parts through the adjuster. One is controlled with a needle, and that's got 23 clicks of adjustment on it. And when that needle is fully closed, the fluid is being directed through another path that has shims on it, so that you're controlling the flow into the reservoir. Then we also make a high speed, low speed compression adjuster, so you can adjust the individual parts. You can control the low speed with the bleed valve, and then you can control the high speed by adding preload to an internal spring. So those are the two kinds of adjusters you'd use. And if you think about the analogy that I gave about high speed, low speed damping and the chassis moving around the wheels and wheels moving around the chassis, high speed, low speed, and you think about a high speed, low speed compression adjuster, that's what's happening.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Well, geez, I learned a lot myself. I'm sure everybody on here did tonight, because, you know, again, suspension is one of those topics that I feel is very important to the functionality of our Broncos, and, you know, maintaining that quality ride, but maybe giving us a few more capabilities off road. And you've answered that very well, Glenn. We appreciate you coming on tonight and being able to help us to better understand that. I guess. Well, oh, yeah, absolutely. Last question I have, and some other people might have that could be asked, is what is availability right now? You know, if an order is placed and maybe there's some customizing, you know, of what they need, what's the lead time right now currently?
A couple of days, honestly. Okay. We have some product on the shelf. We don't fit springs until the customer orders. You know, and if a customer orders something and they're carrying a lot of heavy weight, then we can build shocks with the correct damping in them for that particular customer. So lead times, you know, they're no problem at the moment. We can certainly help anybody who's looking for, you know, for any product. And if anybody who's out there listening, feel free to call my staff, John, AJ, and Thomas. You know, they do a great job. And I've beaten this into them, is, you know, making sure that the customer understands what they're getting, and they go away feeling that they've learned something from, you know, the questions that they've asked.
Right. Well, and I, you know, hopefully I can be a little bit better educated as people ask me questions now, as far as, you know, before they place an order. So yeah, you guys heard it. You know, if you're looking for some great suspension, you can find them there on our website too, at BroncBusterTX.com. And we really, really do appreciate our relationship and our partnership with Radflow. We appreciate Glenn coming on tonight and helping us better understand our suspension. And I look forward to getting with you on these portal builds to kind of dial in a couple of specific packages too that we can offer with our portals. So
absolutely,
again, thank you. So
no problem. Thank you, guys.
Well, with that, we'll go ahead and let Glenn go, and I will update everybody on a few other things. So let's see. All right. So a couple of just small items to touch on. Just a reminder, Wheeling for a Cause, October 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. I hope I got that right. Doug's not here to keep me straight, so I'm sure he'll be texting me shortly if I got it wrong. Don't forget, register at wheelingforacause.org. It's turning out to be a great turnout. We're going to have a lot of fun out here, and most importantly, we get to benefit those that have given so much of life and limb to give us the freedoms that we have, our veterans. So anything you can do to help support that. We also have a GoFundMe on the website, and looking for any and all help. We'll be reaching out to a lot of our partners even more to have them, you know, companies like Radflow to help support this cause as well. And just kind of a brief update. So we got some new videos coming out here real shortly. Some of them with the body lift filler and answering some questions and kind of giving some ideas on the problems that solves. We're putting some together on the pedal box. I think you guys are going to really like the pedal box. It's become Amy's favorite toy. And we learned something this last week. I didn't realize that when we partnered up with Pedal Box to roll this out, to be the first ones to be able to bring this to you, I got talking to the guys over there at DTE, and turns out that the Pedal Box is compatible with all Ford vehicles, 2011 and up. So I haven't had a chance yet, but we're going to be putting it on the 450. Amy likes to drive like a race car, and it gives you that. I mean, if you think sport mode is great, I tell you that I don't know, Amy, what's your experience with it? What do you think?
Oh, I'm loving it. You just get up and go, and it's leave everybody in the dust. It's kind of fun.
So definitely something to check out. It is available on the website. We have quite a bit in stock now, sitting on the shelves, ready to ship out. Of course, another new product is the Trail Sight. Those we have a lot in stock on, and I can't wait to show you guys how it looks on BroncBuster. But we're close. We're gonna start rolling out the first videos here real soon of the BroncBuster build. So we'll have a series of videos about that, and we had some fun. I mean, Amy's glad to be mostly done.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So understand that this entire thing we have done ourselves. I mean, we had Rick Ciotti, the owner of the Paint Spot, there to kind of, okay, Rick, am I doing this right or am I doing that wrong? And he's been a good coach, but we've been out there in the inside that shop in the back with no air moving, 120 degrees, and not fun. But it's been a fun build. It's cool. It's heading off to, like I said earlier, heading off to Lone Star Ring and Pinion. We're going to do some more upgrades to it. The Armadillo hardtop should be done in about 2 weeks so that we can show you guys all the changes and improvements. So I'm excited about that, to bring to you guys and show you what that looks like. And of course, the differential tube is now in full production. We're making them as fast as we can and getting them out to you guys. So anybody that's looking at upgrading their differential tube before breaking that, I'll get some better pictures on the website here real soon. But those are moving, and the hinges are going to be coming out here, or going to be shipping out here this next week. So lots of new products. Working on the manual sway bar disconnect. I don't know. Sometimes I lose track of what all we're working on, but got a lot of things in the works. And the most exciting thing I can't wait to show you guys in the next couple of weeks is the new Bronco with portals. So we're actually, I think, for lack of a better name, we're going to call this Bronco Portal. And we're super excited, and you know, that's one of those projects that we'll keep you guys up to date on as we bring that along. So again, thanks for joining tonight. Amy and I, we get to now travel down to Houston. We're taking off here as soon as we get off the phone or get off the joining us, and we'll see you next week.